Looky looky, a survival RPG that wants to freeze my cookie. Live, Die, Fade to Silence was very good at self-prophesizing its own fate with its title, because the game itself certainly did fade to silence. Actually, I think Fade to Silence is quite a fitting title for most THQ Nordic games. It will be interesting to see how long Kingdoms of Amalur stays relevant for a second time round. So why did I pick up Live, Die, Fade to Grey in a sale for £8.24? It was partly because I liked the concept of a foreboding survival RPG set in the snow. Yes, the setting was enough to capture my interest because few modern RPGs take on a snowy environment. The most standout one I can think of is Horizon Zero Dawn. I suppose rimming would be the next big one, but that's far from being modern. Wait a minute, I can do rimming in VR now?
Yoo-hoo! No, milady, 'tis not my time yet.
The main deciding factor for me getting Fade to Black was that it has online co-op. Nowadays, co-op games are all I care about when it comes to playing online, and this one seemed to offer something a little bit different. Black Forest games have made the online co-op like a drop-in drop-out kind of thing, but you can only join a game by invite. When the second player joins the game, they automatically have the same level armour and weapons as the host. However, the second player's upgrades are separate. People could see that a downside to playing online is that the second player can't keep any of their crafted weapons or resources. That might be enough to convince some people to fade to single player, but I don't think it's a bad thing, because it makes sense that they don't keep anything. I mean, how would duplicating all resources or allowing the second player to take weapons and armour back to their single game make any sense? If it could be done, I'd just take advantage of it by giving my mate loads of resources and the best gear in the game for him to start out with. It would be pretty much cheating.
I misinterpreted the rules.
My mate and I only played it once online because he felt that he wasted 3 hours or so in my game and decided to pack up and leave for warmer climates. When you first start up the game, you'll have two modes to choose from. The first one is Exploration Mode, which gives you unlimited lives, but you can't unlock any perks. The game calls them boons and blessings. The other mode is Survival. In this mode you start off with 4 lives, which are represented by these candles. Each time you die, you lose one, lose them all, and you have to restart the game from the beginning.
I triumphed.
In survival mode you can unlock boons and blessings, as well as shards. These shards give you permanent upgrades to your health, stamina and resilience to starving and the cold. Possibly the most significant difference between the modes is that you can only unlock trophies in survival mode. As you may have caught on, this is one of those games that you're going to die a lot in. It's somewhat like a roguelike in that respect to start off with. That being said, I would definitely advise anyone to go feet first into the survival mode, mainly because of the trophies, but also because this is how the developers intended people to play the game. I think the exploration mode is kind of pointless, as this game is all about surviving. You have to weigh up risk v reward. However, in exploration mode, there's no need to bother thinking about that because death has no punishment. It only has the minor inconvenience of putting you back to the respawn point, which is in the refuge where you start the game from. You can die an infinite amount of times and never lose anything. I think they should have called it God mode. For me, exploration mode takes out the essential component of the game. Fact is, you're going to die a lot in exploration mode anyway, so why not die in survival mode where you have the progression which makes the game easier, and you get the added high stakes of dying. Now, between you and me, you can cheat death if you simply shut down the game and reload it. When you load the game back up, you'll be at the nearest fast travel point with all of your gear and lives.
I misinterpreted the rules.
Obviously, I only found this out because the game likes to crash a fair bit. I think the kind of people that get the most out of these types of games wouldn't care about the exploration mode. Similar to how the people that get the most out of Dark Souls argue there is no need for an easy mode. How I see it, exploration mode is there to cater for the casuals. But I don't think many casuals would be interested in this type of game to begin with, because it takes a fair bit of patience and the game can feel like work for the most part. You should be aware that you're going to waste a fair few hours without making any kind of real progress, since you're most likely going to die and have to restart again. The early hours in the game are going to be spent getting acquainted with how things work and what you've got to do to stay alive. In about 10 hours playtime, all I had to show for it was one perk. In that time, I used up all my lives in survival mode twice, which meant I had to go back to the very beginning, losing all my stuff each time. Live, die, repeat. Talking about getting acquainted with the game, I made a few stupid mistakes early on, but one wasn't down to me, for this is a bit of an unusual game. I found out that fading into the background is unlike every other game I've played on the PS4, as this game doesn't close when you open an app like Amazon Prime. The problem is that this game doesn't pause when you pause it, the game carries on running in the background. So when I went back to the game after watching an episode of the Bates Motel, I found myself nearly frozen. Good thing that I was near my camp, but this game is a cruel mistress. It knows I'll be able to make it to safety from here, but it's dangling my hope, knowing full well it's going to kill me with a blizzard. I did find that fading out of material can be a bit of an unstable game, with dropping frame rates, multiple crashes, popping textures, and whatever this is. Is that you, Jesus? I also managed to get stuck a few times, which forced me to restart the game.
Are you even there?
Thankfully, my Fading Patience has a very good autosave system, so I didn't lose anything when I restarted the game, when it had a funny turn. Which is nice not only for the fact that the bloody thing crashes every now and then, but it also meant that I didn't have to manually save all the time. By far the most common issue I came across was enemies getting stuck. This happens quite a lot throughout the game. Here's my first disappointing encounter with the Crusher. Here's another one I found a bit later on. And these Rippers always seem to get stuck when they're trying to attack my base. At this point they're the equivalent of weeds on my driveway. The dumbest mistake I made was not paying attention to important information. For hours I didn't know that I had to tap X when cleansing nests. Nests are these sphincters with teeth, and it's vital to tap X when cleansing them, as it slows the rate that your body gets corrupted. The more corrupted your body gets, the more of your maximum health is frozen. I do like the use of symbolism here. Don't get corrupted by sphincters, you'll live longer. The other thing I didn't care to pay attention to is that this health restores some of your maximum health lost from cleansing. I am somewhat ashamed to show this clip of me dying because I simply ran out of health cleansing. Apparently the big X being pushed on the centre of the screen wasn't clear enough for me to get the message.
Well, excuse me for being retarded.
Learning lessons like this for me encapsulates what this game is all about. Learning things the hard way and coming back stronger, or in my case smarter each time. This is where boons, blessings and shards help out, because these perks give you extra resources and resilience to start with after dying. The boons and blessings save you time collecting resources and crafting things again. Now, I won't try and hide the fact that dying can be devastating, as you will lose hours of gameplay and it can take quite a long time to get back to the point where you died. However, it's a necessary part of the game, but something that should be considered before getting the game. That being said, I wouldn't let it put you off the game completely, considering that after you have learnt how the game works, the permadeath is no longer a concern. You would have learnt how to avoid death and saved up enough food, wood and lives for it not to be a factor anymore. The one to look out for early on are the stalkers. These things can be utter bastards. But once you've gotten enough resources to survive and you know how to avoid the noob traps, the game becomes a bit of a doddle. Sadly, I think most people won't persevere with the game to get to that point. It's really a game that you live in rather than play. For me, this game dug its claws in, filling me with the determination to get through it, to eventually achieve that rewarding feeling one gets for beating a hard game. Though I wouldn't say this game is hard, it's more down to perseverance than anything. I hope you brought your snow boots with you campers, because Live, Die, Fade to Groundhog Day has an emphasis on exploring and surviving a harsh environment, which in reality boils down to a lot of slow walking around using a Witcher sense to find and gather resources. And of course you start off with a small stamina bar and limited inventory space. The resources you collect are used for crafting and keeping you warm and fed. Later in the game you'll find others out in the world that you can bring back to your camp. These people are very useful because each of them bring their own proficiencies, like crafting better weapons. Most of your time will be spent going out sourcing resources, like reindeers. Once you have killed one, your followers can then go hunt there. Something I like about this is that there's a limited quantity of resources you can gather from one area. Not only is this realistic, but it also naturally forces you to progress further through the game. What you have to do is make sure that there's enough food and wood to burn to keep everyone in your camp happy. The good thing is they're self-sustaining. So there is very little management and babysitting, as they will actually do things for themselves. If the camp needs food, they will go out and get it. If there's no wood, they will take it upon themselves to go out and get some. Unlike the arseholes in State of Decay games, the followers in Fade into Popularity are useful because they have logical and helpful AI. They don't just sit around demanding to be fed. Each of these followers has a backstory, which they will tell you more of the more they trust you. For some reason your followers upgrade their proficiencies the more they trust you. By the power of friendship, I suppose. Your followers also interact with each other, which is nice to see in a game, but mainly they will tell you the latest gossip or why they're annoyed at someone. I was glad to find that this game didn't turn into one of those where I had to constantly deal with conflict. Anyway, the whole point of this gathering is to craft better gear and fortify your base. You'll need to do this to take on the monsters that have set up shop in the woods ever since winter finally arrived. Later in the game, these monsters will also attack your base. Well, we know at least some of them will.
Too far! We're putting it tempted.
Alongside the crafting and inventory management, you'll have to go out and cleanse the world of corruption. Those are the sphincters I mentioned, but there are also outposts, which put up more of a resistance. You'll have to cleanse a number of sphincters, then kill a number of guardians. When you have done that, you'll unlock the outpost as a fast travel point. Upstairs you'll get a load of crap which you can easily transfer to your refuge, and if you're playing on survivor difficulty, you will get a life and a boon.
Test your might.
When you've got hold of what to do in the game, you will realise that you have to plan expeditions. Firstly, you have to have a goal in mind, then you have to make sure that you've got enough food and wood, both at your base and to take with you. To make things easier, you can assign a follower to go with you on your expedition, but personally I didn't really bother, as I found them more useful to be at the base crafting or collecting supplies. Now, there are two consistent things that can balls up your plans. One is the blizzards and the other is the metal meatball. What this arse does is throw scrap cars and plants at you. There's nothing you can do about it, all you have to do is just keep dodging the projectiles until it gets bored and buggers off. The projectiles aren't too hard to dodge, however you have little time to stand still, so it's hard to cleanse the sphincters and search crates. What these projectiles subtly do is delay the time you can progress, which means there's a higher probability of you getting too cold or running out of food or wood. Also, the longer you're out in the elements, the higher the chances a blizzard is going to happen. Because of this subtle tactic to waste my time and resources, I like to screw with the metal meatball by running round in circles. However, the game doesn't like being mocked, so at times it would throw a blizzard at me as well, which meant my trip was screwed, because as we know, if you're caught out in a blizzard, you'll die. These two conveniently turn up pretty much every time you venture into a new area, one after the other, or at times they can double team you. I get why this happens, but my god it can be annoying to travel all the way back to a shelter to then travel back again. I wish I could say to the Spectre, mate, could you just not bother with the blizzard? You're not going to kill me with it, as you always warn me about them. All you're doing is delaying the inevitable. Do you really actually want to kill me with these blizzards? Again, I get the reason for this is to increase the chances of me running out of supplies by delaying my progression, but does it really have to happen so frequently? In the game we play as Ash, who is dead when you first start up the game. Then a nice Grim Reaper-like spectre comes along and decides to bring us back to life, just so it can mock and undermine our efforts to survive, all the way up until the point we inevitably die again. This chappie is really happy to see us die over and over again. Just look at how chuffed he is staring at our frozen corpse. did we do to deserve this horrible fate of live, die, repeat? Well, that's what we're here to try and figure out. As you go through the game, you'll get little snippets of flashbacks revealing events from the past. The story structuring is very similar to Everspace. And just like in Everspace, Ash also has a case of amnesia.
Let me get this straight. Does anyone here not have amnesia? I don't know.
I somewhat feel sorry for the Spectre in this situation, as it can never move on from perpetuating this tormenting cycle. Equally, he is as much of a prisoner as Ash in this cycle of torment. It's kind of beautiful in a tragic kind of way. The story is split into two linked parts. One side explains why the world is in the state that it's in, the other explains why this Spectre has such a hard-on for Ash. They both intertwine, but the story is predictable and underwhelming. Thankfully, our suffering can be shared with other equally terrible voice actors we find poking about in the woods. The first character we're introduced to is our daughter, who is, like most kids, utterly useless. You'd think in this situation she would at least try to do something to help our chances of survival, like collecting a bit of firewood. But no, she does nothing but wait for me to come back. Every time I return with battle wounds and frostbitten hands, she greets me happy as anything. Between you and me, I suspect she is either a ghost or she has a stash of Twinkies somewhere. That would explain why she never eats anything and doesn't seem the slightest bit concerned about dying a miserable death. A fricking snow angel at a time like this? In all seriousness, I found it a bit difficult to get invested in the story because of how disparate the characters sound to what they're saying, mainly Ash. He sounds like his bread and butter is consistently getting small checks for dubbing over Japanese games. Undeniably, Fate to Silence needed more development time before being kicked out into the cold, not only due to frame rate issues, crashes and enemies getting stuck, but because the game also has some quality of life issues. The first one I came across was when I equipped a bow. I couldn't initially understand why it had no arrows when I knew full well that I had some, so I went into my inventory to see what was going on. I found out that I had to equip them as well. Jesus wept, talk about being pedantic. Is this really necessary? Why can't the game just assume that I want arrows to go with my bow and automatically equip them? Not being content with that being enough dicking me about, the game forced me to eat more yellow snow because I can only equip a maximum of 12 arrows at a time, even though I've got plenty more. Why doesn't it have my arrows equipped? That's because the game wants me to go and equip them anytime I use one. This was a constant thorn in my arse, as I had to open up the inventory and hold down square to equip them. The most frustrating thing about this is that I would have accepted having a maximum of 12 if Ash had a quiver, because that would at least make some sense. I don't know why they didn't include a quiver, maybe it was an oversight, or maybe they simply ran out of time to include it, but it should have been a bit of gear that later on could have been upgraded, just like how the pouches can be upgraded for more inventory space. What really let this game down though is the base attacks. It's the most exciting combat focused section the game has to offer. However, the frame rate drops so low that it's almost unplayable. Not that it matters, because none of the enemies actually attack me. They just walk right past and attack the base defences while my followers casually pick them off. It really becomes an idle threat that I don't actually have to do anything about. The constant pain I had to live with was that this is yet another game that made me hold down a button to do anything. To unlock a crate, hold X. To search the crate, hold X. To take all items out, hold X. This again is really unnecessary. These actions are quicker to do in real life than they are in this game. You have to hold down a button and watch a loading bar to pretty much do anything. You could argue that it's realistic that things would take time to do, but this is a game, and making me wait to do things I'm doing all the time doesn't add anything positive to the experience. Now, I can accept that crafting items and skinning animals would take time, fair enough, yet I feel holding down X to get on a sled or search boxes is just a step too far. And just like how Mad Max can happily get out of a car with a tap of a button, Ash can simply get off the sled the same way. However, both of them require me to hold down a button to use their respective modes of transport. I just don't understand how anyone can justify this as a good idea. Again, like I said in my Mad Max review, imagine how annoying this would be in something like GTA 5. It's not in GTA 5 because the fact is, it's stupid. By far the best example to demonstrate my frustration about the button holding is cooking meat. Because you don't have the option to craft all, look how much meat I have to cook here. I can't do anything else with meat but cook it, so why not have the option to just cook it all? I can't even hold down square to cook one after the other. Nope, I have to let go of square then hold it down again for every piece of meat. Also, I'm the only one that can cook. So, you know when I said that followers are self-sufficient? That's not entirely correct, because sure they can hunt and gather meat, but none of them can cook it. They will sit round starving to death with tons of meat right there in the storage, waiting for the bitch to come home and cook dinner for them. Why didn't the developers include cooking food with the butcher's hut? Again, I don't know, but it certainly would have been a good idea. Later in the game, when I got the sled, I found I no longer could ride it into my camp, because it would disappear. I figured out that it did this because I put down plans to build fort defences. The pain in the ass here is that I want to move the resources I have gathered from the container on the sled to my base's storage. But because the walls made my sled disappear, I could no longer park it right next to the storage in my camp. What I had to do to avoid the sled disappearing is park it outside and take as much crap out the container and walk it to the storage. This could take up to 3 trips thanks to the limited inventory space. It's about as much fun as it sounds. The insult to injury here is that the sled is always sitting in the hut, but I can't access the container and simply move my ship from there to the storage. Now the worst thing that can happen is for the sled to disappear, because if it does, I then have to get on the sled in the hut, which then cuts to a loading screen, then spawns me outside, wasting even more of my time. I found the only way to avoid this baffling mess is to use the summoning crystals for the sled. They can be used right near the storage container in the base, which feels stupid as the sled is already sitting in the hut. What they should have done is allow the sled to automatically be parked in the shelter on approaching the camp and have all of the resources automatically moved to the storage. That would have solved all of this pissing about. Something that threw me off initially when I started the game was the stat bars working backwards. The fuller the bars are, the worse condition you're in. So when the food bar is full, for example, you're actually starving. This is just deliberately misleading. Surely it would make more sense to have the bar full when Ash is full and empty when he is starving. It's the same thing with the temperature bar. It would make more sense for the bar to be lower the colder Ash is. Now if they kept this continuity with all of the stats, the remaining bar, which counts up to the attack on the base, would then work as a countdown timer, rather than a count up timer, which in my opinion works better. The most hurtful kick in the teeth I received from fading trophies was when I completed the game, because it didn't give me the end game trinkets. I went back and completed it again, but still I didn't unlock the trophies. What else could I do in my time of need but look online for help? Thankfully, in doing so, I found others who have encountered the same problem. The solution that worked for them was to keep repeating the end game cutscenes until the trophies popped. But of course that didn't work for me, so I took drastic action, uninstalling the game and completing it again. Frustratingly though, that didn't work either. Now I am stuck in the dilemma of either carrying on watching the same endgame cutscenes with the hope that I will get the trophies, or starting the game again. I have really been screwed over because at the end of the game you get infinite lives in survival mode, which means I can't simply die and run out of lives and restart the game with all of my upgrades. Even though this would have been a pain, I would have been somewhat motivated to do it, as I would have had my shards and I could finally use my boons and blessings. Having infinite lives at the end and no new game plus has rendered both the shards and the boons pointless. If I start the game again, I have to do it without any of my upgrades, which I don't particularly want to do. On the other hand, I equally don't want to keep watching the endgame cutscenes. I am literally sitting in purgatory, not liking either of my choices. And there is no guarantee if I complete the game again that I won't find the same bug at the end of the game. Maybe I will do the game again if I find someone to play it with, but my attention has gone on to other games now, so I really can't see that happening. Something I haven't talked about is the combat, for good reason, because it literally feels like a budget game that belongs on the last gen console. The combat is sluggish, basic, and poorly animated at times. That's all that needs to be said about it. It feels like it's been tacked on at the last minute to the survival game they originally had. I feel this game is going to be a hard sell, as there are quite a lot of things that will put people off from trying it. I've talked to a few people that wouldn't even consider the game because of its graphics. Personally, I don't think that holds any water, as there isn't anything wrong with them, it's nothing remarkable, but at the same time it doesn't look terrible. Other people I have come across have called the game a hidden gem. I don't agree with that either. Though I did enjoy it, I think the reason I liked it was more down to the timing of starting it than anything. If I put it on at another time, I believe I would have dismissed it as a boring, uninspired, unpolished mess. This game certainly has a niche for the kind of people that like to slowly chip away at a game, gathering resources and overcoming harsh weather conditions. However, there are many other survival games out there, and Fading Audience doesn't do anything special to elevate it above others. You know, I brought up Kingdoms of Amalur at the beginning of the video. Well, my mate Dex bought the remaster and he really enjoys it, even though he describes it as a watered down Skyrim. When I tried to push him to put forward a solid positive for the game, he can't really offer anything, but he still stands by saying that it's a good game. I feel that I'm in the same boat with Fade to Silence. I can't really give a good argument for why I liked it or why anyone should buy it. I mean, saying I had fun slowly going around collecting resources doesn't sound fun at all, but that was the case. I certainly wouldn't advise most people to get it, however I feel that I got my money's worth, and for that reason I'm going to hesitate but concede that ultimately I thought it was a good game. To be fair, I would knock off £1 for the bad voice acting and half-baked story. I would take off another £1 for the crashes, poor frame rates, janky cutscenes and screwing me out for platinum. A further £1 can be knocked off for the underwhelming combat. That brings it down to about £5, which I think is fair for the reasons I've put forward. I think soon enough the game will find itself in a bargain bin. That being said, I'm happy with the £8.24 I paid for it, because I had a fun time with the game, but more importantly, by purchasing it, I hope it encourages Black Forest to make more games like this one. Because before making this, the studio were given projects other studios were too important to make. Stuff like the remastered Destroy All Humans, the Gianna Sisters and Bubsy. It can't be nice as a game studio to not be given the opportunity to flex your creative side with a new IP. I think with the right level of success from Fade to Silence, THQ Nordic would give them another opportunity. It would be sad to see their next game be another project other studios wouldn't waste their time on. I genuinely hope that the game does well enough for THQ Nordic to give them another shot at another IP. I'm looking forward to see what they come out with next. I hope they're given the opportunity to shine as a studio. I'm sure they've learnt a lot from Fade to Silence and will apply what they've learnt from it to their next game.